The champagne was still cold in my hand when my brother got down on one knee. Not to me, to his girlfriend of 3 months. At my engagement party, while I stood there in my white dress, watching everyone I loved forget why we were there in the first place, my fiancé's hand went limp in mine. The room erupted in cheers. But not for us, for them, for Marcus and some girl whose name I'd learned 2 weeks ago. While David and I, the couple who'd been together for 4 years, who'd saved for 2 years to throw this party, became background noise in our own story. I watched my mother cry happy tears for the wrong son. I watched my father raise his glass to the wrong couple. And I felt something die inside me that night. Something I didn't even know was alive until it was gone. My brother had always been the golden child. But this was different. This wasn't just stealing attention. This was stealing my moment, my night, my future, and making everyone believe it was his to take. I should have seen it coming. The way he'd asked about the guest list, the way he'd insisted on giving a speech, the way he'd shown up early with that stupid grin and told me I looked nice. Not beautiful. Not radiant. Nice. But standing there, watching my own engagement party become his proposal celebration, I realized something. Marcus had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. He'd shown me exactly what I was worth to my family. And more importantly, he'd shown me what I was capable of doing about it. Growing up, Marcus was the sun. I was Tuesday. That's how it felt anyway. He'd walk into a room and suddenly everyone had something to say. Stories to tell, jokes to laugh at. I'd walk in and get asked to turn off the lights when I left. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. They did, in that quiet, functional way people love a reliable car. I was dependable Sarah. The one who got good grades without being asked. Who cleaned her room without being told. Who never caused problems, never demanded attention, never needed anything. Marcus was different. He needed everything. Attention when he succeeded, comfort when he failed, money when he was broke, forgiveness when he screwed up. And somehow needing made him more important than providing. I remember the night he crashed Dad's car when he was 17. Drunk, no license. Could have killed someone. I found Mom crying in the kitchen at 2 a.m., not because she was angry, but because she was scared. Scared for him. Scared of what could have happened to her precious boy. 2 months later, I got a B+ on a test I'd studied for all week. Dad looked at my report card and said, "What happened here?" Like I'd disappointed him. Like my B+ was somehow worse than Marcus's DUI. That's when I learned the rules. Marcus could fail spectacularly and still be golden. I could succeed quietly and still be invisible. But I adapted. I had to. I became the child who didn't need parents because my parents had already chosen their favorite. I raised myself, essentially. Got my first job at 14. Saved for my own car. Applied to college alone. Figured out financial aid myself. And you know what? It worked. I became independent, strong, self-sufficient. Everything Marcus wasn't. The irony was beautiful, really. By ignoring me, they'd created exactly the kind of person they should have been proud of. But by then it was too late. I'd learned not to need their approval. I'd learned to find it elsewhere. That's how I met David. At 23, working at a nonprofit, living in my own apartment, paying my own bills. He was a social worker, kind and steady and impressed by my independence. He didn't try to fix me because he didn't think I was broken. For the first time in my life, someone saw me first. Not Marcus's sister. Not the quiet one. Just me. Sarah. The woman who'd built herself from nothing and was proud of what she'd created. When David proposed, I cried. Not just because I loved him, but because someone had finally chosen me first. Someone had finally seen me as worth celebrating. I called my parents immediately. Mom cried happy tears. Dad cleared his throat and said he was proud. For a moment, I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe my engagement would be the thing that finally made me visible to them. I should have known better. Planning the engagement party felt like stepping into sunlight after years in the shadows. Finally, I was the one people wanted to talk to, the one with news worth sharing, the one with a future worth celebrating. David and I saved for 8 months to throw the party we wanted. Nothing extravagant, but elegant. The kind of night that would make people remember why they loved us, why we belonged together, why this mattered. I spent weeks on the details. The playlist that told our story, the flowers that matched my grandmother's china, the menu that included both our favorites. I wrote invitations by hand, addressed them personally, added little notes to people I hadn't spoken to in years. This was my moment, my night, my chance to be the center of something beautiful. Mom helped me pick out the dress. White, but not too white. Elegant, but not too formal. We shopped together, had lunch, talked about the future, about grandchildren someday, about how proud she was of the woman I'd become. Dad offered to bartend, said he wanted to contribute somehow, wanted to be part of making the night special. It was the first time in years he'd volunteered to help me with anything. Even Marcus seemed excited. He called me 3 times the week before, asking about details. What time should he arrive? Should he bring anything? Could he say a few words about David and me? I was touched. My whole family finally rallying around me, finally making me feel like I mattered. The day of the party, everything went perfectly. The weather was gorgeous. The food was delicious. People kept telling me how beautiful everything looked, how happy I seemed, how perfect David and I were together. I felt like I was glowing, like I'd finally stepped into the life I was meant to have. Marcus arrived early, just as I was putting the finishing touches on the centerpieces. He looked nervous, which was unusual for him. Marcus was never nervous. He was confident, charming, effortlessly social. But that night, he seemed almost anxious. "You look nice," he said, surveying the room. "You really went all out." "Thanks," I said, straightening a candle. I wanted it to be perfect. He nodded, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Can I say something during the toasts?" "Of course," I said, not looking up. "I'd love that." He smiled then, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Great. I think people are really going to remember tonight." I should have asked what he meant. Should have noticed the way he kept checking his phone. Should have wondered why he'd brought his girlfriend to a party where they barely knew anyone. But I was too happy to be suspicious. Too grateful to have my family's attention to question their motives. For once in my life, I was the main character, and I was determined to enjoy every second of it. The party was perfect until it wasn't. Everyone had arrived. The room was full of laughter and conversation, and the kind of warm energy that makes you remember why you love people. David was working the room, charming my college friends, and making my dad laugh. I was floating from group to group, accepting congratulations and compliments, and feeling like the luckiest woman alive. When Marcus tapped his glass for attention, I smiled. My big brother wanting to toast my happiness. Finally ready to celebrate me the way I'd always celebrated him. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, and the room quieted. "I know we're here to celebrate Sarah and David tonight." I beamed at him. This was it. This was my moment. "But I have something I need to say, something I can't wait another day to say." He looked across the room at his girlfriend, Melissa, I think her name was, and my stomach dropped. Not because I knew what was coming, but because something in his expression felt wrong. Too intense. Too important. "Melissa," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. 3 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything." The room was completely quiet now. Even the music had stopped. I could hear my own heartbeat. "I know we haven't been together long, but when you know, you know." He was reaching into his pocket. He was getting down on one knee. At my engagement party. In front of my friends, my family, my fiancé. "Will you marry me?" The room exploded. Cheers, applause, screaming, crying. Everyone rushing toward them, surrounding them, celebrating them. While I stood frozen in my white dress, holding a glass of champagne that suddenly tasted like poison. David's hand found mine, but it felt cold. Distant. like he was reaching for me from very far away. I watched my mother cry. Happy tears. The same tears she'd cried when I called to tell her about my own engagement. Except bigger, louder, more public, more important. I watched my father clap Marcus on the back, beaming with pride. The same pride he'd never quite managed to show for me, even on my best days. I watched my friends, my own friends, rush to congratulate the happy couple, forgetting entirely why they were there in the first place. And I watched Marcus look at me over Melissa's head as she sobbed yes into his shoulder, not apologetic, not embarrassed, triumphant, like he'd won something, like he'd beaten me at a game I didn't even know we were playing. "Sarah," someone said, I think it was my cousin Emma, "isn't this amazing? You're going to be sisters-in-law." I managed to smile, to nod, to say something appropriate. But inside I was disappearing, becoming invisible again, fading back into the background where I'd spent my entire childhood. The rest of the party became a blur of congratulations for them and awkward condolences for me. People kept saying things like, "Ooh, what a crazy night," and 2 engagements in one family, and "your parents must be so happy." But I could see it in their eyes. The pity, the secondhand embarrassment, the way they looked at me like I was the opening act who'd been upstaged by the headliner. David and I left our own party early. We walked to the car in silence, listening to the continued celebration behind us. The party that had been meant for us, now belonging entirely to them. "I'm sorry," David said when we got home. "That was humiliating," I finished. He nodded. "Your brother is..." "My brother," I said. "And that's never going to change." But I was wrong about that. Everything was about to change. Starting with me. The wedding was off by Christmas. Not because David stopped loving me, but because something fundamental had shifted that night. We'd both seen how easily I could be erased, how quickly my own family would forget I existed if someone more interesting walked into the room. David tried to fight for us. He suggested eloping, a small ceremony, just us and 2 witnesses. But I could see it in his eyes, the doubt, the question of whether he was getting the consolation prize, whether he'd chosen the wrong sister. I couldn't marry someone who'd seen me disappear and wondered if I was worth finding again. So I gave him back the ring. Not in anger, but in kindness. Both of us deserved better than a marriage built on the rubble of my family's betrayal. The breakup devastated my parents. Not because they'd lose David, they barely knew him, but because they'd lose the wedding, the photos, the grandchildren, the normal family milestones they could post on Facebook. Marcus called me once. A awkward, half-hearted apology about bad timing and not meaning to steal your thunder. Like his proposal had been an accident, like he'd tripped and fallen onto one knee. I listened to his voicemail 3 times before deleting it. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I was done being invisible. Done being the reliable daughter who asked for nothing and received less. Done being the opening act in my own life. I used the money David and I had saved for our honeymoon to enroll in a master's program. Business administration. Something practical, powerful, profitable. Something that would make me impossible to ignore. I threw myself into school the way I'd once thrown myself into being the perfect daughter, relentlessly, completely, without looking back. 2 years later, I graduated summa cum laude, got a job at a consulting firm in Seattle, bought a condo with a view of the Sound, started dating a surgeon named James who thought my independence was sexy, not threatening. Meanwhile, Marcus and Melissa's marriage imploded. Turns out a relationship built on impulse and attention-seeking doesn't have great foundations. She left him after 18 months, taking half his savings and all his confidence. That's when he started calling me again. Not to apologize, but to ask for help. Money, advice, a place to stay while he figured things out. I never answered. But I did send him something, a copy of Seattle Magazine with my picture on the cover. 30 under 30, business leaders shaping tomorrow. The article called me a visionary entrepreneur who built her own empire from nothing. I didn't include a note, I didn't need to. The message was clear. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your attention. I don't need you. The girl who'd been invisible had become impossible to ignore, and the brother who'd stolen her moment had lost everything trying to recreate his own. 5 years later, I'm planning my actual wedding. To James, the surgeon who's never once made me feel like second choice, who proposed at home in our kitchen on a Tuesday morning while I was making coffee, who said he didn't want to share the moment with anyone else because it was ours. My parents will be there. They'll walk me down the aisle and cry happy tears and tell everyone how proud they are. And I'll let them, because I've learned that forgiveness isn't about them deserving it. It's about me deserving peace. Marcus won't be there. Not because I'm cruel, but because some betrayals create a distance that can't be crossed. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars that change the landscape forever. He still calls sometimes, usually when he's broke or lonely or needs something. I listen to the voicemails, but I don't return them. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I've worked too hard to build a life where I matter to let someone back in who spent years teaching me I didn't. People ask me if I regret how things ended with David, if I wonder what would have happened if we'd fought harder for each other. The answer is no. That night at the engagement party didn't destroy my relationship. It revealed its weaknesses. It showed me that love isn't enough if it can't survive the truth of who your family is. James knows about Marcus, about the engagement party, about why I don't talk to my brother anymore, and he doesn't try to fix it or explain it away or convince me to forgive and forget. He just holds my hand and tells me he's proud of the woman I became despite everything, because of everything. That's the thing about being made invisible. It teaches you to see yourself clearly, to know your own worth when no one else does, to build your own light when everyone else is too busy staring at someone else's. Marcus thought he was taking my moment, but what he actually did was set me free. Free from needing my family's approval. Free from competing for attention I should have received automatically. Free from settling for love that wasn't strong enough to see me clearly. He stole my night, yes, but in doing so, he gave me something much more valuable. The knowledge that I didn't need anyone else's celebration to know I was worth celebrating. I reclaimed my life, and it's more beautiful than any engagement party could ever be.